wanted to share something that happened to me a couple of years ago. It's 100% true and it still haunts me to this day. I'd be really happy if you shared it, but please keep my name private. Thanks for taking the time to narrate it. The story happened to me a couple of years ago in Canada, in a pretty major city. I'm keeping the location and names anonymous for my own privacy and safety, but I can tell you this much. The area where this took place has had some problems before. Violence, complex beefs. It wasn't a place where you just chilled around at night, and this night made that fact all too real. It was around 2 a.m. when my ex-boyfriend and I took an Uber from my grandma's house to his place. The plan was for me to stay over, but when we got to his front door, he realized that he'd left his house keys back at my grandma's. Neither of us really felt like calling another Uber right away. It was late and we were both kind of on edge. Not with each other, just in that weird restless kind of way you get when you're overtired but not quite ready to go home. There was a small park just a 2-minute walk from his house, so I suggested that we just sit there for a bit before heading back. He agreed. We walked over and sat on the teeter-totters. This park was totally empty, dimly lit by one flickering streetlight, and the air had that heavy stillness that just makes everything feel a little wrong. Now, to give you a better picture of the layout, because it actually matters for what happens next. The park was located on a street that splits off from a main road. His neighborhood kind of forms a complex with 2 small dead-end streets. One on the left where the park sits, and one on the right with more houses. Both dead ends. One way in, one way out. We were only there for maybe 5 minutes when I had noticed a black car pull into the complex from the main road. It had fully tinted windows. I remember that detail so clearly. I couldn't see a single thing inside of it. The car slowly drove toward our side of the park down to the dead end, did a U-turn, and then drove to the other side of the complex. Another U-turn. Then it came back. By this point, my stomach was doing backflips. The way the car kept circling like a shark was giving me the worst feeling I'd had in a long time. My ex felt it too. He leaned over and whispered, "Get up, start walking." No hesitation. I got up and we started fast walking toward the roundabout on the opposite end of the park. The car suddenly stopped. The windows rolled down. Inside, I could see maybe 2 or 3 men. They yelled out to us, "Yo, yo, yo, where you guys from?" Now, if you know anything about certain areas in Canada, especially places with complex beefs between neighborhoods, then you know that question isn't innocent. It was aggressive. It was bait, and it meant trouble. We didn't answer. We didn't look back. We kept walking, and then we heard the doors open. They were getting out. That's when we started running. The adrenaline hit so hard I barely felt my legs. My ex was yelling at me to just keep going. I remember the crunch of gravel behind us, fast footsteps. Then I saw something that still gives me chills. A small red laser skimming across the ground near my feet. I don't know if it was attached to a gun, but that's what it looked like. And if it was, they weren't just trying to scare us. They were trying to hunt us. We bolted out of the park, ran across the main road, and darted into someone's backyard. At that point, I could barely breathe. I thought any second I'd feel a bullet in my back. We called 911 from that backyard. I don't even remember what I said. I was shaking so bad that I dropped the phone twice. The cops showed up eventually, but by then the car was long gone. To this day, I don't know who those guys were or what they wanted, but I do know one thing. If we stayed in that park even 1 minute longer, I might not be alive to tell this story. Let this be a warning. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it is off. And never ever get comfortable at 2 a.m. in a neighborhood that you don't fully know, because someone might be watching, waiting. Warning: the following story briefly mentions sexual abuse with a minor. Please skip this story if you do not want to hear that type of content. I'm currently a 22-year-old female living in Toronto, Canada. But this happened to me when I was 12 years old, living in a small town 2 hours away. I have always been a quiet and reserved child, so much so that I didn't have many friends, and those that I did call my friends had many other people, and to them I was more of a third choice. It was summer, and school was let out just the day prior. I had made plans with one of my friends to meet at the park. We'll call her Maya. She was a popular girl, and she was 2 years younger than me. So oftentimes we would make plans to go to the park or the lake. This was like no other day, but unfortunately, it was one of those days. Even though we had plans, she had canceled at the last minute to go do whatever. Since I lived about a 45-minute walk from the park, I just decided to play around. After a little while, I had heard a sound, and it was an ice cream truck. So I ran over and went to go buy a milkshake. I believe a vanilla milkshake. As I went to hand him the money, he told me that I didn't need to. He then asked why I was by myself. I told him and he felt bad, so he offered to let me come inside to look in the truck. I thought that I was the luckiest kid in the world. He let me play the sounds, sit in the driver's seat, and just have the best day of any kid's life. Then I went back to the park, and of course the story doesn't end there. We became friends, and after like 2 weeks he gained my entire trust. But then one day, he started to get handsy. He put his hand on my thighs and he gave me tight hugs, but I didn't think too much of it. Even though my gut was screaming at me, I ignored it. But one day, he got more touchy, much more touchy. He started asking me really weird questions, asking what color underwear I wear, if I started wearing a bra, and if I wanted to see his private parts. This was strange to me, but he would always follow them up by saying, "Don't worry, we're friends, and friends talk about this kind of stuff." And I believed it. Then one day, he got more than a little touchy. He started to convince me to undress, and that we played around. We did a lot of things that I'm really ashamed of in the last 2 months of the summer. But the very last day we were together, I had started to grow distant, and I wanted us to not continue these things. But that didn't work out. He got angry, and he forced himself so hard on me. I was screaming, and I begged him to stop. He didn't, and there was a moment where he stopped, and he had his back turned to me. My fear, anger, and disgust fully took over, and I didn't think. I saw a knife on the counter and held it. Soon after he turned around, he had laughed at me and walked towards me. I didn't think. I just drove the knife right into his manhood. He then fell to his knees, crying and pleading with me, wondering why I did this. I ran out of the truck, and I just kept running until I ran into the forest that was next to a field. And once I couldn't run anymore, I collapsed and I passed out by a tree. I woke up several hours later. I never told my friends or family. I didn't get the cops involved or anything. I blame myself for that. Who knows if he did that to anyone else? He could have been in jail now or dead. Not a day goes by where I don't have regrets. If I see or hear an ice cream truck, I get flashbacks. I'm dizzy and scared. I have a current diagnosis of PTSD due to this and many other horrible things too. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to Southern Cannibal. I've been wanting to post this for a few years now. I'm getting help, and I told some of my close friends about this, and I've spoken to a psychiatrist about it too. This might not fit in with the usual stories that you all hear on the channel, since there's really no physical proof that I have, but for me, it's still fresh in my mind just like it was yesterday. The story takes place on a Saturday during late spring in 1999 when I was 12 years old. I lived in a city called Brandon, Manitoba, Canada on a busy main road. I used to babysit my niece and nephew whenever my sister needed to just get out of the house. And since she lived 3 blocks away along the same busy street, it didn't take me long to get there. Before I should continue, I should explain a couple of things that will be relevant for later on in the story. I had a beautiful new mountain bike that I loved riding, and on this day, I was wearing one of my favorite outfits, which was a neon green tank top and matching shorts. So now that that's been said, I'll get back to the story. That morning, my sister needed to go grocery shopping and asked if I could babysit. Having nothing better to do, I hopped on my bike and got there shortly after. After a few hours of babysitting, my sister showed up, and after a quick chat, I hopped on my bike at 2:05 p.m. Now, here's where it gets scary. I woke up in the middle of that very busy road on the center line with my bike on top of me. I pushed it off and got up before walking my bike and me to the sidewalk. As I quickly assessed myself, I had what I could only describe as road rash all over my body, but the weird thing was that it didn't hurt at all. The scrapes and scratches were everywhere and felt rough, but yet I couldn't feel any pain or soreness. I looked at my bike and it was still perfect. Nothing was wrong with it, and my neon green clothes were not dirty or ripped or really anything. I was perfectly fine, but I wasn't perfectly fine. I got back onto my bike and rode the last block back to my house. When I got in the front yard, my family freaked out. My sister and mother were all home waiting for my brothers and dad to get home from doing another few laps searching for me. Turns out it was 7 p.m., and they had searched up and down that very street, as well as the rest of the city, looking for me for hours. My mom went to treat my road rash, but was shocked when I didn't wince or anything from the rubbing alcohol. I explained what I knew and where I woke up. My dad and brothers also eventually showed up, and I explained it all again. None of them had seen me. None of this made sense to anyone. They took me to the hospital, and after hours of being thoroughly examined and blood work taken to rule out drugs while I explained to the hospital staff and police officers, I was able to go home. Apart from the road rash, I wasn't really assaulted in any other way, and no one could explain why my clothes were perfectly clean with the amount of scratches that were on my body. Neighbors who lived down the street where I woke up were coming home around that time, but none of them remember seeing me. Police officers on patrol who had driven down that road frequently also didn't see me. We were told later on that there were no drugs in my system at all. So what happened during those 5 hours? No one can explain it, not even me. Since that day, I've never been on a bicycle, and I have really bad anxiety when thinking about that city. I moved from there a year later, and will never go back. Over the years, I've tried many different types of therapy to try to recover those memories of those 5 hours, but there's nothing to recover, I guess. So, who really knows what happened? I know it sounds crazy, but the only thing that I can really think of is aliens or something supernatural. Again, I know that sounds crazy, but at this point, I really don't know what to think. For some background, I'm a female and I live in Canada, and this occurred during my first term in my first year at university. I was fresh out of high school and just barely 18 at the time, but I've always been told that I look young for my age. At the time this took place, I lived with my parents and commuted to campus via the bus. I had a 4-hour gap between my first and second class of the day, so I would take the 20-minute bus ride home to relax and eat lunch, and then head back for my later class. From the beginning of the term, I noticed a guy who would always take the same bus as me at the same times and get on and off at the same stop. I would often notice him staring or would catch his glance, but just assumed it was a coincidence. One day, about a month into the term, I was waiting for my bus at the bus stop near my house to go to my second class for the day, when I noticed the guy come up from behind me. He was asking if I was going to my Indigenous Studies class, as he was also in the same class. I said yes, thinking that I might make a new friend or at least an acquaintance in the same class as me. We chatted for a while with some small talk, and when the bus arrived, he sat right beside me and continued to chat about my degree and his degree. Through this, I found out that he was 5 years older than me. I found it a bit strange that he would come up and talk to me given the age gap and that I look young for my age, but just hoped that he was just friendly and I could gain some advice about the university from him. When the bus arrived on campus, we both got out and headed to class. This pattern continued for a few days. Every time I took the bus, he was also there sitting right beside me. Sometimes he would chat a lot and show me funny videos on Instagram, and sometimes he would be completely silent and answer questions with one-word answers. About a week or two later, he asked for my snap to keep in touch about an upcoming assignment in the class we had together. I didn't really want to give it to him, but figured there wasn't much harm because it was just Snapchat. The first snap I got from him was a selfie asking what I was up to. I was at home watching a show, and so I sent him a snap of that, and he told me he was at the bar and asked if I wanted to come pick him up. I politely declined as at that time I'd shared a car with my brother, and I didn't feel like picking up this guy at 1 a.m, but he didn't take the rejection very well, and he got angry with me. I avoided snapping him for a while after this, as I didn't like how he was behaving and wanted to just try and stay safe. But the next day he snapped at me, and he told me we should watch the show together. He even went as far as inviting me over to watch the show with him. I declined his offer as I wasn't really interested in spending time with him at all, let alone in such a vulnerable environment. The following weeks, he continued to take the bus at the same time as me and started to touch my arms and legs whenever we sat next to each other. I was very uncomfortable with this, but I didn't want to say anything as he really frightened me, and I wasn't sure what he would do if I told him to stop. I tried to avoid him by sitting away from him, but he would always move to sit beside me. He also started following me home and would ask to come inside. I used the excuse that it was my parents' house, so I wasn't allowed to have anyone over. This seemed to deter him from coming inside. Then he started snapping me and asking me if I would come over and hook up with him. I declined this as I personally do not even do hookups. This didn't stop him, as he continued to snap me and ask for nudes and tell me I was cute and tiny. This really grossed me out, as I was freshly 18 and he was 23. I know that's not a huge age gap, but there's definitely a difference in maturity. After this, I told him to stop contacting me altogether, and he called me a hoe. I then blocked him on Snap. The term was almost over by this point, but I unfortunately continued to see him a few more times on the bus. I really tried my best to avoid him, but when we were on the same bus, he would continue to put his arm around me or touch my thighs. When the second term of the year started, we had different schedules, so we took the bus at different times. I avoided him as much as possible, and successfully did so for that term. Then, the following year and the start of my second year at university, I thought that he was finally done with his degree and I would catch a break. Unfortunately, after the first day back, I had received a message on Canvas, which is the platform my university uses for professors to post information and assignments for classes. This guy found me on Canvas through the old class that we had together a year prior to send me a message to tell me that he saw me and to add him on Snap since he can't find my Snap. I ignored these messages, but then later on I received a follow request from him on Instagram. I also blocked him on Instagram and hoped to not see him. Unfortunately, I found him following me around on campus a few times, and he was also on the bus. By this point though, I had a boyfriend who would drive me to campus most of the time. I would take the bus home sometimes though, because our schedules didn't line up. Every time I saw the creep on the bus, he would always stare at me and then move beside me. I decided to stop taking the bus, and luckily my boyfriend was able to drive me to and from university every day. I got many requests from different Snapchat accounts that I believe belonged to him, but I just didn't accept them. It's now the second term, and I'm back to taking the bus, as my boyfriend is working a job this term. I haven't seen the creep yet, but that doesn't mean he hasn't seen me. Hopefully he's finally finished with his degree and he'll leave me alone permanently. Stay safe out there, guys, and don't trust anyone. So this actually happened to me today, and it felt like something I should share here as a caution to others. I live in a small city not too far from Edmonton, and recently there's been a series of armed robberies happening in and around the area. It's made me wary about walking alone at night, so I found myself home at night more often than usual. It's not the worst, but I really dislike having this feeling of unease, but I manage and make do. So today, my dad and his girlfriend were invited out to a party, meaning I had the whole house to myself. I pretty much had the evening all planned out. Watched some episodes from my favorite soap opera, then switched over to some classic horror films. So I said bye to them as they left, and then quickly loaded up the TV. It was not long after that I'd started up the horror movie that I had heard a knock at the door. It wasn't a regular knocking either. If my TV had been any louder, I probably wouldn't have been able to hear it. Thinking it was nothing at first, I went over to the door without pausing the movie just to confirm. But to my surprise, there was someone at the door. I opened the door and there stood a slim man. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and that's all I can pretty much say. I'm not the best when it comes to describing people, and I didn't really go out of my way to analyze him at the moment. I couldn't even tell you if his jacket was gray or black. The man said he represented a security company and was going around my area to offer his company services. He asked if the owner of the house was home, to which I told him no and that he would not be home until late. He then began giving me some quick information about his company, that it was the only one that was locally funded, that it's already being used in several homes on my street, and that it's smart device friendly. He even showed me a laminated piece of paper that displayed all the different devices that could work with the security system. I told him that we weren't interested in having a security system at this time. He proceeded to ask me if my family leaves the house for long trips, which would be a great reason to get the security system. Looking back on it now, this was a huge red flag, but I answered honestly that the house was almost never empty and that we never really went on trips. I also added that he could speak to my dad tomorrow if he was coming back. He told me that his team would be leaving for another city tomorrow. Then he thanked me for my time, then left. I went back to my movie and pretty much forgot all about that visitor. The movie finishes and I decide to check my Facebook to glance at the buy and sales. Near the top of my feed is a shared post that caught my eye almost immediately. What I read next made me completely freeze up. It was from a woman who had also talked to a representative from the exact same security company that I'd been advertised to. This guy knocked on her door softly too, which immediately caught my attention. She noted how the guy never gave his name or business card, something I didn't even realize happened to me until I thought back on it. Overall, she was very suspicious of the guy, so she asked him to wait outside as she got some pen and paper to write down his phone number. When she returned, he was gone. The next door neighbor told her that they saw a man running down the road and into an alley. But the biggest fact that this woman dropped? She contacted the security company, and it does actually exist, but they told her that they didn't send anyone out to the city to go door to door. This shared post is blowing up, and it seems that it occurred to a lot more people than just me. Some people even showed video from their security cameras of these employees. There's definitely more than one person pretending to work for this company, one even being a woman, and a lot of strange activity being reported. One person going into the backyard without permission, another person standing out in front of the house like they're scoping it out. Knowing all of this now, it makes the entire encounter with that guy at my door all the more terrifying. Was he scoping out my house too? Would he have tried something if I didn't answer? I also wonder, was he hesitant to try anything because I didn't pause my movie? For all he knew, I could have had a friend over. Luckily, nothing serious happened for the rest of the night, but I will be extremely cautious from now on. If there's one thing I would advise, be suspicious of anyone you don't know that comes to your house. Just because someone says they work for a company doesn't make it true. You don't know who they are or what they might actually want from you. This happened 3 years ago in the middle of July. I'm a female and I was 16 years old at the time. I live in Canada, Ontario, and everyone usually has this image that Canada is really safe. However, that perception will not stop any creepers. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens here from time to time, more often now than before. To start off, I live in the suburbs. It is not the safest city, but it can be safe if it's daytime, along with it being in a well-crowded area. I was going on an evening walk, which I did quite often during the summer, usually before sunset, as I had to be home before that. The path I take my walk on is on the sidewalk of a main road, so there are a lot of cars passing by, and still quite a few cars pass by before sunset, as this is the time some people get home from work as well. I was walking, minding my own business and enjoying the cool evening air. A car honked. I didn't think much of it though, as I wasn't sure if it was at me, but there also wasn't much traffic either. On the sidewalk, there's an entrance to the plaza, so cars driving onto the main road can turn into this plaza. I looked both ways just to make sure a car wasn't going to pull in, and I crossed. Strangely, after I crossed, I noticed the same car from the corner of my eye. This is when I realized the honk was probably at me. After I crossed, I looked back. I don't know why I looked back, but I acted on my hunch to look. I now wonder if I could have avoided this if I just didn't look. At that moment, the man made eye contact with me as his window was down. He was turning into the plaza, although his car wasn't really in the plaza. He turned his car into the entrance of the plaza and just stopped it so it was completely blocking off the sidewalk. If any cars wanted to come in, they couldn't because he blocked it off with his car. And if anyone is walking on the sidewalk, they'd have to go around his car. I was really confused but alarmed. He opened his car door and started to approach me, and I began to back away so that he isn't too close to me. To describe the man, he wasn't that tall but still taller than me. He wore these big black sunglasses, so unfortunately I don't know what his entire face even looked like. He wore a Brazil t-shirt, FIFA World Cup at the time, and white pants. He began to converse with me, telling me that he thought I was some woman that worked at some shop that he goes to, and I told him no. I knew that this is a red flag and probably just some bullcrap as well. I had my guard up the entire time. I didn't want to talk to this man, but I didn't want to make it appear that I was frightened, so he didn't try and pull off some kind of stunt. He was still trying to create a conversation with me. He repeatedly kept telling me that I was beautiful to the point that would make anyone feel really uncomfortable, which really did make me feel uncomfortable, but I just played it off by saying thank you. He then asked me, "How old are you?" I then replied back telling him I'm a minor, thinking that maybe he'll just leave me alone. Clearly, I thought wrong. He then asked me to say where I'm from, to which I thought saying my ethnicity isn't something private, so I told him. I responded back saying, "I'm from Syria." I don't know why I asked the same thing back to him because I realized that I'm just feeding the conversation, but at the same time, I don't want to show my fear, so I was trying to appear calm. He then told me that the old president of his country was Syrian, which was probably just a lie and was just trying to find a way to relate to me. He then told me, "Arabic women are just very beautiful." At some point in the conversation, he kept calling me beautiful and pretty, which was still making me uncomfortable. He asked me if I was looking for any guys, if I was interested. I told him no. Then he asked me, "What boy's causing you trouble?" I replied saying that all that stuff is just a waste of time, thinking if I said that, maybe this time he will leave me alone, because at this point it just seems like he's trying to hook up with me. That or he had some other intention judging by the way he was acting and talking, which is not something someone usually initiates on the sidewalk of a main road. I really don't know why I tolerated this uncomfortable conversation at this point, because then he tells me, "You're so beautiful. I don't see why any boys wouldn't like you." On the inside, I'm just thinking, what the hell does someone say in response to that? I just awkwardly forced out a laugh. He then proceeded to say, "Seriously, how old are you?" I know that I shouldn't have said what I just said now, but I told him how old I was. I said I was 16. He just stood there saying, "Wow, I never would have thought you were 16. You seem way more mature. I thought you were at least 24. I took the opportunity to ask how old he was since he was so persistent in knowing my age. He's 32 years old. This man is twice my age. I asked for his name because in the back of my mind, I felt like if I had this info about him, it could maybe be useful. Again, this was probably not a good idea because I realized afterwards this is only feeding the conversation. He told me that his name is Jonathan. Then he asked me for my name, and I said that it's a secret. At the time, I was thinking that was slick of me, but I'm actually pretty thankful that he didn't get aggressive. He kept insisting that he'll move his car from the middle of the entrance so that we can talk, and I said no, I had to get going, so I said that I'm leaving, to which he then says, "Why?" What do you mean, why? Then he started asking me for my number. I told him that I don't give my number to strangers. He was telling me that he really wanted to be in contact, and he started asking if I had Facebook or WhatsApp, to which I said no. He just kept insisting that we keep in contact after I repeatedly refused to give him any sort of my contact information. He then says, "Hey look, I'm gonna go move my car." I thought this was my chance to leave because he wanted to move his car so he could continue talking to me. So right at that moment, I then said, "I'm leaving, bye." At this point, I just had enough. I thought this was the end of it because I had heard him say bye after I turned around to leave. Only when I looked to my right, I noticed that he was following me in his car. He rolled down his window and began to smile and wave at me, which was really disturbing. This really freaked me out, so I started to walk faster. When I looked back, I didn't see his car, but I was able to connect the dots to realize that he went into the gas station that was behind me. Unfortunately, this still wasn't over. His car was parked in the gas station, and he proceeded to walk on foot on the same sidewalk that I'm walking in, so I definitely believe he was following me. My fight or flight mode broke in, and I began to run home, which was only minutes away. I even took off my sandals so that they wouldn't snap and hurt me while running, so I didn't have 32-year-old Jonathan on my trail. I even stopped for a moment to explain to these two ladies that there's a man following me, to which they looked at me like I was crazy and just ignored me. Fortunately, I made it back home safely, and when I looked back, I couldn't see Jonathan, so I assumed that he just turned back when he saw me running. I really consider myself lucky that he didn't start running after me. I truly believe that if all of this didn't occur on the sidewalk of a main road, but rather in a secluded area, he probably might have tried something. His presence made me feel uncomfortable. Needless to say, these evening walks also came to an end. Some of this information is a bit fuzzy, but this happened to my mom around 1989 when she was around 19 to 20 years old. My mom had moved to Manitoba, Canada to stay with her aunt and uncle while she worked. The company she worked at was on the top of 3 floors of an office tower on Portage Avenue. It was located on the same level as the cafe, so everyone came up to their floor and walked past its reception desk if they wanted something to eat. The receptionist would often ask my mom to cover for her while she went on her lunch break. While taking over one day, a handsome Middle Eastern man came up to her and struck up a conversation. He was around his 40s, dressed sharply, and said that he worked in a company a few floors down. He commented on how attractive she was and asked if she wanted to do any modeling for his company. He handed her his business card and left. She wasn't sketched out at all by the guy because he seemed so normal, but asked both her mom and aunt what she should do. They both told her to go for it, but to call the Better Business Bureau to see if the business was actually legitimate. According to the Better Business Bureau, it was real. The next day, while my mom was working the desk, he approached her again and asked if she had put any thought into the offer. He asked to meet for lunch the next day at the Fairmont Hotel so they could talk about the business. The hotel was in walking distance from the company, and you could see it through the window of their offices, so she felt safe enough to go by herself. She did tell her coworkers, and they agreed to call the police if she wasn't back in time. The next day, she arrives at the hotel early. She finally spots him at the check-in table. She goes up to him and realizes that he's checking into a room. She's getting a bit weirded out because all he said was that he wanted to have lunch in the restaurant there. He explains to her that he has a whole briefcase full of stuff that he wanted to present to her, and that it would be more private to show her in the hotel room. After a bit of arguing between my mom and him, he finally persuades her to go to the room. The check-in staff looked a bit skeptical while he handed him the key. They get in the elevator, and that is when she realized that he does not even have the briefcase, and that it wouldn't be in the room already because he had just checked in. Instead of getting the hell out of there like a normal person would, she follows him to the room. She takes the chair by the window while he lays down on the bed with his arms crossed behind his head. He can tell she's uncomfortable, so he asked her what her dream car was, and he tells her that she could afford it in a few months by modeling for him. He said that all she would have to do is wear different kinds of clothing and lingerie, and stand in separate partition rooms while buyers from all around the world would bid on the outfits, or bid on her. After his spiel on the company, He asks her to take off her clothes so that he can see her body because she needs to have a good figure to be able to model. Again, she's iffy, but he persuades her to get undressed in the bathroom and walk out in a towel so he can get a good look at her. While she's in the bathroom, she hears him talking in a different language and laughing on the phone. She walks out in her towel and he tells her to do a spin while he's on the phone, but she gets freaked out and runs back into the bathroom to get dressed again. She opens the door and then bolts out of the room. He stands up and watches her run down the hallway, but luckily doesn't follow her. She tells her coworkers all about it, but she doesn't call the police because my mom was so embarrassed that she was dumb enough to do all that for him. A few days later, while walking into work, she sees a bunch of cop cars surrounding the building. She later finds out by a coworker that the guy was arrested for solicitation of prostitution. At least, I think that's what he was charged for. She was freaking out that she would get in trouble for getting into that situation, but the officers never asked her to come in for questioning. 2 weeks later, while walking to her parked car in a back alley, she saw him sitting in his car watching her with a big smirk on his face. I guess he got out on bail. She ran to her car and sped out of there. That was the last time she ever saw him, and she moved back home a few months later. Hey everyone, hope you all enjoyed today's stories. Consider stopping by on my Kick streams sometimes. Now that I've officially face revealed, I'm streaming multiple times a week on Kick. And yeah, it'd be pretty cool to have you there. It's a pretty fun time, so consider stopping by. Anyways, hope you all have a good day. And remember to always stay